Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, Death by Southwest listeners and friends. I don't know why I felt the need to kind of like sing that in a sing-songy voice, but hello. Nope, I'm not going to say it. I continue to say like happy Monday, happy Tuesday. I'm just going to say, hi, it's Monday. Yeah, it's Monday afternoon. How was everyone's weekend? Anything exciting happen? If you told me about your weekend on Instagram, I wouldn't know because I've only made it through like 5 messages there. Yeah, since this is basically a rhetorical question until I publish this and you send me an email, voicemail, or DM, I am going to tell you about my weekend. So I have a bunch of videos and pictures I haven't posted yet, but Mark and I went to, first of all, it was so cold in Tucson this weekend. It was Friday night. We took the dogs for a walk at 6:30, 7 o'clock maybe. Cold, like bundled up in jackets, came home and made a fire. Oh, it was so exciting. It was like the happiest night ever. And then Saturday night, we went to Terror in the Corn. I think I posted like when we were driving there, we had a few cocktails. Well, I did. He was driving. So I'm not totally sure. But when I say that it was the most fun we have had since, I don't know, since Belize. That sounds bad. Like we're always having fun. Okay. We're not always having fun. We're often having fun, but this was, it was so much fun. So the way, and I'll have to post the videos because it's going to be hard to explain, but like the way, it's out in the middle of kind of nowhere. I mean, it's a giant corn field and corn maze. And then there's 3 haunted houses. So each of them is a different theme and each of them has like a little bit of inside. So they've built these structures. I don't want to call them a house, but it's whatever. It's like a structure. And so they're all like you walk through the front gate and it's just this giant open field kind of. And then it's formed into like a circle by all the things around it. So you have the bathrooms, the porta potties over here. Then you have one haunted house. And then, 100 feet to the right of that, another haunted house entrance. 100 feet to the right of that, another haunted house entrance. And then there's, a pumpkin stand, a couple food and beer stands, a little place to sit and drink or eat. There's a couple escape rooms that are like in shipping containers. There's axe throwing. There's a DJ kind of right in the middle-ish of it, playing music like so you hear it all the whole time you're there. It was just instantly like fun, and it was really cold. So we were like bundled up in jackets, and it just felt really festive. And so we got our tickets there. We didn't get them in advance. Some of this information is just for people in Tucson if you decide you want to go before the end of the month, which I highly recommend. So we got our tickets. When we got there, we walked up, bought our tickets, and went to get, I think we got a beer and then got in line at the first like haunted house. So they're all different themes. The first one was called Blood Moon Ranch. The second one, I don't know what it was called, but it was a clown theme. And the third one was, I don't remember the theme, but it was scary. And so we got in line at the first one. The line wasn't very long because it opens at 6. We were in line by 7. But we're like waiting in the line for the first one, and it's not very long, but we can see very quickly behind us, it's getting really long. So Mark was like, just stay in line. I'm going to go upgrade our tickets to fast passes. And I was like, fast pass is like a Disneyland thing where there's hundreds of thousands of people. Like, do we really need a fast pass at Terror in the Corn in Tucson? Yes, we did. Like, I highly recommend getting a fast pass. It's, I don't know, $6 more per ticket. And the fast pass, there is no line for fast pass. We just walked to the front of the line, basically. So that first one, I was waiting in line while he went to get it. And, you know, they have costumed actors walking around. And I hate, in any haunted house, I hate a chainsaw situation, which you know they always have. And I know it's not real, but it sounds and smells real. I know they take like the whatever off of it. That's the technical word, whatever. But I just don't like it. And especially not if I'm standing there alone. So I kept like, he's like walking through the line, walking up to people, like doing the chainsaw. This guy dressed as, I don't know, Michael Myers kind of. I'm like trying to make myself as small as possible behind the people in front of me. And then finally Mark came back and we got out of line and just like walked up to the front of the line because we had fast pass and we were able to just go. And if we didn't have a fast pass, there's no way we would have made it through all 3 haunted houses because each one takes maybe 30 minutes on average, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But by the time we got out of the first one, which I couldn't tell you much about because I had my eye. A lot of the first one is inside and in pitch black, and I can't do that. So my eyes were closed. I just held on to the back of Mark's jacket and closed my eyes, and I just like shuffled behind him. I actually have, I think, a video of blackness. It's just all black, and you can just hear my feet like shuffling behind him. And the whole time I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this. So I don't really remember that one. We did eventually get outside into like the corn maze part, which was great. But by the time we got out of that one, the lines were, you know, they have the front of the line, it like coils around, it like wraps around, back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. But then at a certain point, it can't coil around anymore. And there was just a line all the way out through the middle of the field. And, you know, it goes slowly because you don't want to be going through the haunted house with a ton of people in front of you or behind you, because then you're not scared by the people who jump out. Like, that was the scariest part, was the people who jump out. I definitely got complete jump scares, like screamed out loud at least 15 times. Totally unexpected every time. But if there's people, the last one we went through, they kind of like lumped us in with another group of people because there's only 2 of us. And so the people jump out and scare the people in front of us. And so it's kind of not as scary. It's better to do it alone, and especially as 2 people, because it's like, it's just the 2 of us. So yeah, we wouldn't have waited in the other lines. We wouldn't have made it if we didn't have a fast pass. So I definitely recommend that. The second one was really cool. You got 3D glasses, and there was like 3D neon glow in the dark paint throughout. It was like really well done. You know, people always say, like, was it scary? I don't know. Like, I know it's fake. So no, the scenes, like with all the like gory, bloody, whatever stuff isn't scary. And because I know that it's fake, I was startled, like, I guess, yeah, scared by all the people who jump out, because they jump out and then some of them would like follow. So they jump out and I'm like scared. I'm like, oh, scared. And then we laugh and then we keep walking. But then all of a sudden they're like still there behind me and I have to like turn around. So they do a really good job. But yeah, the pitch black part, and then in the, I can't remember if it was the first or the second one, there is one part where it's like these giant balloons almost, but they're tall balloons and thin. It's like a turnstile, but you have to kind of smush your body through these balloons, and you can't, it's pitch black on the other side. So you don't know what you're walking into. And I did not like that, but I did do it. It was just really cool. It was really, really fun. Had an amazing time. We were, there all night. I don't know. We left at like 10 or something. So it doesn't have to take a long time, but we also did, Mark surprised me. And when he went to add the fast pass, he added axe throwing. Cause I've said, I want to try that. I don't know why. This looks cool. Like something cool to try. And so we did that right before we left. And I have a video of Mark doing it. Way harder than it looks. I've seen it on maybe reality TV or something. Like I've seen people do it. And it looks like, okay, I could do that. My gosh, it's way harder. Way harder. It was fun though. So I give it like a 10 out of 10. Terror in the Corn. I think on Friday and Saturday nights, it's $35 for regular admission and like $42 for fast pass. It was just super fun. I was like, I want to come back next weekend. But I think that, maybe I don't want to ruin it. Like if it isn't as fun the second time, because we had such a great time. So we might try Slaughterhouse this weekend. We're having my dad over for dinner this weekend, so we'll see. But we might try Slaughterhouse because now I know that like in the very dark or completely black parts, I'll just close my eyes, because at least if my eyes are closed, I don't know how much space there is around me. I said that the pitch blackness triggers my claustrophobia. So if my eyes are closed, I could be out in an open field. Who knows? And that's just in my brain what I picture. So that's what I'll do. So that was Saturday night. Sunday, Mark and Michael went out and got menudo, which is their favorite thing to get. I'm surprised actually. I bet Mark hasn't talked about that on here. I definitely won't eat menudo. And then what? Oh, then we went to AT&T because both of us are due for an upgrade on our phones. So we did that. My screen on my phone is completely shattered. I've had this phone for a long time. So hopefully that the new phone will be here in the next few days. And then maybe I'll be able to take better pictures and videos, like how iPhones have 1, 2, 3 lenses on the back. And then they have a flash, and I don't know, maybe this is another lens. Anyways, one of mine cracked like a year ago, and I was like, well, I can fix it myself. I'm not paying hundreds of dollars for somebody to fix it. So I ordered a DIY, iPhone camera repair on Amazon, and it did kind of work. But if I zoom in too much, there's like a big giant black line across it. I don't know. So it didn't work that well. So maybe the new phone, supposed to have a better camera. We'll see. I feel like the iPhone never really changes that much. And then last night Mark put the dogs in his car to go to his house, because we always stay at his house on Sunday nights and usually do like sushi Sundays. And so he took the dogs, and I was going over to my friend's house who is out of town this weekend. She was out of town in Mexico. She's coming home today. And I'm trying to remember how much I've talked about her on here, because I'm annoying. I know it's probably annoying, but I annoyingly always am trying to be very cautious of sharing other people's stories or information without their consent, I guess. but maybe I've talked about her. We went through the breakup together, kind of. Her boyfriend broke up with her about a month before Mark broke up with me. So, and she lives really close to me. So we really supported each other, I feel like, through that time. Unfortunately, her and her ex-boyfriend have not gotten back together. But I don't know where I was going with that. But anyways, she is not necessarily, she's not from here. So she goes back home a lot, and she travels a lot. So she was out of, and so every time she travels, since she lives so close by, I watch her adorable little cat, and that cat is like her life. She adores that cat and is like, babies it and takes such, like, has 8,000 million toys, and just, I think she feels very similarly. Like, that cat to her is kind of how Izzy was to me. Like, has helped her through tough times, made her feel less alone, things, what pets do for us. I don't really need to like explain that. I feel like, sorry. And so I've gotten to know the cat pretty well and really enjoy visiting with the cat and taking care of the cat when she's out of town. And so yesterday I stopped at her place on my way to Mark's to feed the cat and just check in. And the cat had died sometime, I was there Saturday and then I was there Sunday. So sometime between Saturday late afternoon and Sunday afternoon, the cat had died, which I have actually never come like home to an animal that's passed away. All of my animals have had to be put to sleep. All the dogs have had to be put to sleep. I think even the cats, because they reached an age or a level of illness that just, it was time. So I was horrified, like for multiple reasons. I guess not multiple, but for the reason that like I didn't know initially what to do. And I immediately was just crying because this cat that I've gotten to know over the past 2 years is now dead. And then also for my friend, mostly for my friend, that like this cat is her life. Oh my God, how am I, like, this is going to destroy her. Oh my God, I could cry again thinking about it. I'm not going to. Hold on. It's just like my heart, she's been going through a tough time the past week or so. And just like not being there, I guess I immediately, I don't know if this is like selfishly, but like I immediately related it to myself. Anytime that Mark and I went away, that's why like I always brought Izzy with me, because I was always terrified, like the last 2 years of her life, whenever we went somewhere, that she was going to die and I wouldn't be there. And that guilt would destroy me. It was a huge fear of mine. So we didn't really leave her. She came with us. And so I just immediately was like putting myself in her position and knowing that she's going to feel not only terrible that she lost her like friend, her cat, but that she wasn't there, which realistically probably a good thing. But oh my gosh, like what a terrible situation. I just cried and like sat down in her kitchen and was like, what the fuck do I do? Because she was coming home. She's coming home today. So I was like, I don't want to, like, there's nothing she can do. She can't come home. She's too far away to like just come home. And sadly, the cat has already passed. There's no reason for her to rush home. So I'm not going to ruin her last night. So I called Mark. And Mark was like, okay, I just got to my house. Let me drop the dogs. I'll be right there. And so he comes over. I'm waiting for him to come over. I call my friend, and we used to work together, Brandon. He's good in a crisis, and he's also has cats and is a big cat person. And I'm a cat person as well. I just I needed some outside perspective, I guess. So I called him. I was like, what do I do? Do I tell her? Do I not? Like, what do we do? Because Mark's on his way here and we need to figure out what to do. And he's like, okay. He's like, I would take some pictures just in case she wants to see her. And I was like, see her like baby dead. Okay. So I did. And he said, I was like, do I put the toys away? Do I throw out the litter box? He's like, I would leave everything. He's like, you're going to need to get the cat in the freezer and maybe don't tell her if you think that's best and just be there when she gets home tomorrow. I was like, okay. So Mark came over and he's like, yeah, we're not gonna be able to fit the cat in the freezer. I was like, okay. So at this point, I don't know what to do. And my friend is texting me like, hey, how's my baby doing? Because I forgot she has a Ring camera. So she saw me arrive. And then she saw Mark arrive later, like 15 minutes after me. Hold on, I hear a bird chirping. I want to make sure Indiana doesn't have anything. Oh no, Indiana's inside. Never mind. So so she's asking me, and I'm like, I'm not going to lie to her. That's a terrible lie. So I didn't know what to do. So I called her aunt, who she's close with and lives here. Thank goodness. Her aunt was like very kind and was like, okay, yep, I think that's okay. If you need to tell her, if she's asking you and you don't want to lie, tell her she can call me. It's going to be okay. Like, she was very helpful. So I did. I had to tell her. And then Mark went and bought an ice chest and ice and like a pillowcase to wrap her in. He came back and took care of that, thank God, for me. And yeah, I mean, she was devastated. She was hysterical, and she's coming home today. And so after this, I don't know if she will want me to or not, but I offered to come over and like help her put away the cat toys and stuff in a box. She just recently got like a dog door, but for cats installed. It's very sad. It was a situation that I never, ever would have wanted to or expected to find myself in. And I hope that it never happens to any of you because it's shitty. Shittier for her, obviously. Like, who the fuck cares about me? It's a shittier for her. It's just a terrible situation. So that was a terrible way to end the weekend. It was a very nice weekend, and it was sad. So I don't think she listens to this, but if she does, she knows who she is. That sounds so stupid to say. And I just want to say that, keep some good thoughts for her, everybody who's listening. Yeah. Okay. That's all that felt like an abrupt ending to that very tragic story. I guess I could end it with, she's going to be okay. Like, where she'll get through it, and I'm going to hopefully be that she has good friends and she has family here. And so she's going to be okay. And yeah, so there's a 23 minute intro. Great. Now we're going to jump into a mini crime story. This mini crime story, again, not so mini. I'm kind of failing at the mini. I feel like a mini crime story should be like 15 minutes. Doubt that this is going to be 15 minutes, but we'll see. So this is the murder of Martha Moxley, which took place on October 30th, 1975 in the upscale community of Greenwich, Connecticut. Martha Moxley was 15 years old at the time, and she was joining her friends for what they called a mischief night. It was kind of a local tradition where the kids and teens in town would play harmless pranks like ding dong ditch and toilet papering houses, things like that. And so during the night, throughout these like festivities that night, everyone noticed that Martha was flirting a lot with Thomas Skakel, who is 17 years old. He has a younger brother Michael Skakel, who was 15, same age as Martha. He's also there, but she's flirting with Thomas. And the Skakel brothers were neighbors of Martha's. They lived in the community, and they were a pretty influential family because they were related by marriage to the Kennedys. So around 9:30 p.m. on October 30th, people saw Martha and Thomas near the pool in the Skakel backyard, and they were kind of playing around, wrestling, and they eventually people saw them falling together behind the fence. That's in quotation marks in every article I found it in. So I don't know, they pretended to fall over, but at the same time, I'm not exactly sure. But they were behind this fence, probably making out a little bit, flirting, whatnot, being playful with each other. And this is the last time that Martha is ever seen alive, because the following afternoon, October 31st, Martha's body is found beneath a tree in her family's backyard. It was a pretty haunting, troubling scene. Martha's pants and underwear were pulled down, though they ended up not finding any evidence of sexual assault. One of the investigators was quoted as saying, "We didn't even know what color hair she had because it was all blood red, and all of the blows or damage were all to her head. And then we could see a path that she had been dragged down in the high grass, down to where her final resting place, which was under a tree, a pine tree." Investigators traced this trail of blood. She was found under a pine tree in her backyard, but they traced the blood all the way to her driveway. And that's where they also found a piece of the murder weapon, which was, they found the shaft of a 6-iron golf club. It was if this means anything to anybody, a Tony Penna 6-iron. She was struck so violently that the shaft of the golf club had shattered, and one portion of that had shattered was driven through her neck. So that the autopsy concluded that she was brutally bludgeoned and stabbed with the golf club. So very violent death. And forensics traced this golf club back to the Skakel household. Apparently this golf club was part of a set that was the mom's, who had died about 6 months prior from cancer, I think. So this obviously raised quite a bit of suspicion. Obviously, Thomas Skakel, who was seen flirting with and being playful with Martha, he became a suspect because he was the last person to be seen alive, or he's the last person to be seen with her when she was alive. And also the golf club was traced back to his house. And then after police spoke to Martha's friends about Tommy trying to get a better picture of this, they said that Martha's friends said that Tommy really wanted to date Martha, but his advances may not have always been welcomed. On September 12th, about 6 weeks prior to her death, she wrote in her diary about going for ice cream with Michael and Tommy, both of the brothers. And she said, quote, "Went driving in Tom's car. I was practically sitting on Tom's lap. He kept putting his hand on my knee." And then October 4th, in her diary, she wrote, "I went to a party. Tom S. was being an ass. At the dance, he kept putting his arms around me, making moves." And then as far as the other brother, Michael, goes, he supposedly was said to have had a drinking problem since he was 13. So he was 15 at the time of Martha's murder. And that Martha may not have liked that so much about Michael, because also about a month before her death, in her diary, she wrote, "Michael was so totally out of it that he was being a real ass. He kept telling me that I was leading Tom on. Michael jumps to conclusions. I really have to stop going over there." Martha's friends also said that Tommy and Michael were known to have explosive tempers, and they were fierce rivals for anything for anything. They would rival over everything against each other. Sports, affection, a girl's attention. And I'm going to tell you more about these brothers in a little bit further down here.
Bored at home? Head over to Chumba Casino and join some serious social casino fun. With hundreds of games at your fingertips, no purchase necessary. You can play anytime, anywhere. There's a special welcome bonus waiting for you when you sign up. Play for fun, play for free, and you could even redeem some great prizes. Visit ChumbaCasino.com and get ready to reel in the fun. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
Where is that? I would think that it would be... Okay, it is a little bit further down. Okay. Sorry, guys. That's so unprofessional. But you're not coming here to this podcast for the professionalism of it, I don't think. So they were bitter rivals. They were brothers and good friends, but they were also rivals. So both of the brothers at this point are looking kind of suspicious. The drinking, the explosive tempers, the things she wrote in her diary, the fact that the last person she was seen alive with was Tommy. So Michael told police that around 9:30 he left his home, the Skakel residence, to visit his cousin Jimmy Terrian. He said that Martha stayed behind with his brother Tommy. Tommy claimed that he saw Martha around 9:30 also, but that's when he went inside his house to write a paper on Abraham Lincoln. Unfortunately for Tommy, police later discovered that there was no assignment. He didn't have to write a paper on Abraham Lincoln. So this initially kind of pointed suspicions at Tommy because his story, he was fibbing, lying in his story. But right off the bat, the fact that the Skakel family was very, very wealthy, very influential, had a lot of power, connected to the Kennedys, that came into play. And their father refused to grant access to the police to any of Tommy's school records, mental health records, anything at all. And they didn't really have any concrete evidence at this point, so it kind of stunted their investigation into both of the brothers. And then, even though Tommy did lie about writing the paper, he did have a witness for his alibi. So somebody witnessed Tommy around 10 p.m. with Ken Littleton, who was a new live-in tutor that had just been hired at the Skakel residence. Literally, he'd been hired that day, October 30th. And Littleton told police that him and Tommy were watching TV around 10 p.m. He said, I don't know, I didn't notice anything weird about Tommy's behavior, which is significant because the crime was so brutal and so violent. It would be very difficult. Like, how would Tommy brutally murder Martha around 9:30 and then be like just chilling, hanging out, watching TV, no blood, no nothing with his tutor at 10 o'clock? It just didn't make sense. So supposedly the police really heavily investigated this, but there were no arrests made immediately following her murder, and not for months, because their investigation there was no concrete evidence. There were really no other suspects. But they still were looking at Tommy and Michael until Tommy's lawyer told the father, Rushton Skakel, to stop cooperating with the police. So Rushton was like, we will not be answering any more questions. We will not be helping you anymore unless you have something to, arrest my son or sons. We're done. He also terminated Ken Littleton, the tutor, who had moved into the Skakel house that day of the murder. And apparently Ken Littleton's life went kind of downhill after this. He moved to Nantucket, and he started drinking pretty heavily, using drugs. He was involved in some small petty theft type crimes. And since they had no other leads, investigators were like, well, let's look into this Ken Littleton. He moved in the day of the murder. He was seen hanging out with Tommy, and now he's suddenly like an alcoholic drug addict. So they were speculating that kind of decline, like in his personal life with the drinking and the drugs, maybe it was connected to Martha's murder. Maybe he felt guilty. But it fell apart pretty quickly because he had no motive. He didn't even know Martha. He had just moved there. He had no motive. He didn't know her prior to the murder. And the very, very violent nature of the crime really, really did suggest to investigators that it was committed by somebody who had some type of personal relationship with Martha. Plus, they had no concrete evidence linking Ken Littleton to the murder. So they were suspicious, but there was nothing to substantiate this idea. And at this point, there are really no more leads to pursue. There's no new evidence. And those months turn into years until it becomes a cold case for many years. Until around 1991. So the case went cold. They stopped investigating and it stopped, as things do. The news cycle turned over, stopped being talked about, and people kind of moved on. And then in 1991, there was a very high-profile trial of William Kennedy Smith, a rape case. He ended up ultimately being acquitted, but this case, his rape trial, kind of put Martha's murder back in the spotlight because a rumor surfaced that linked him to the Skakel household on the night of the murder. It was a kind of a bullshit rumor, but it did kind of get people talking about the murder again. And that same year, 1991, Rushton Skakel, the father of Thomas and Michael, he hired a private detective agency called Sutton Associates. And he wanted them to delve into Martha's death because he was tired of, this trial of William Kennedy, who's a relative of Rushton and the Skakels, reignited interest in Martha's murder, which reignited interest in Tommy and Michael. And Rushton did not like this. So he wanted to put this to bed once and for all. He hired this private detective agency, and the agency conducted an extensive investigation and came up with what they called the Sutton Report. This Sutton Report was later on, it was leaked to the media, but it kind of backfired. This whole thing backfired on Rushton's plan to clear his son's names because this Sutton Report revealed inconsistencies in both Thomas and Michael's accounts of their activities on the night of the murder. Both of them had changed their stories multiple times, is what these private detectives found in their investigation, which added a whole new layer of suspicion. And ultimately, this Sutton Report really ended up pointing a strong finger at Michael Skakel. So Tommy was the one who Martha was like flirting with, maybe making out with, and was the initial suspect, but supposedly had an alibi being with the tutor watching TV, which again, now this Sutton Report is saying, well, that may not have been true. Their stories were kind of inconsistent. Not kind of, they were inconsistent. However, this report found that Michael actually seems like the more likely suspect. Also around this time, which drew just more and more to attention towards this, was some various print publications that came out. So Dominic Dunn, she's a fiction writer, but she wrote a book called A Season in Purgatory, which was a fictional novel, but it very closely paralleled Martha's case. So this also reignited interest in it. And former LAPD detective Mark Furman released a book in 1998 called Murder in Greenwich, where he called in the book, he actually said Michael Skakel is the murderer. He pointed out in his book a lot of different mistakes, kind of oversights that the original police investigation made. He really criticized how the case was handled and just point blank said, Michael Skakel did it. But even before these publications came out, the detectives, the Greenwich police detectives, whose names were Steve Carroll and Frank Garr, they were increasingly becoming convinced that, yes, Michael Skakel might have been responsible for Martha's death, and they didn't look closely enough at him before. So this is when they decided to reopen the investigation into Martha's murder. So in June of 1998, after decades of little movement on this case, something called a one-man grand jury was assembled to re-examine the evidence in Martha's case. Now, I had no idea what a one-man grand jury was. So a one-man grand jury is a legal procedure where a single judge is appointed to function in the capacity of a grand jury, instead of a group of citizens serving as jurors to evaluate the evidence and determine if there's enough probable cause to indict someone for a crime. A sole judge carries out the investigative role. And I was like, well, what causes someone to do, why would you choose this over a grand jury? Well, it's a one-man grand jury. So why would you choose this over a group of citizens grand jury? And what I found was that a one-man grand jury is often utilized for cases that are particularly complex or sensitive or high profile. It ensures a high degree of legal expertise. I'd imagine that's important if the case is very complicated, and if the case is high profile and requires a lot of discretion. That's also much easier with just one person. You can have more secrecy and privacy during the investigation, which can help prevent media leaks. It can also operate more efficiently than a traditional grand jury because one person, this one judge, can make decisions about subpoenas, warrants, and legal matters without the need to consult with multiple jurors. So it can be particularly effective. And in the investigation, as this one-man jury pertains to Martha Moxley, they chose to do this because of because her case was unresolved for such a prolonged period of time, and because it involved influential individuals, the Skakels. So the judge went over decades of evidence. Well, not decades, because they didn't collect evidence for decades, but evidence that was decades old, heard testimonies, assessed and listened to new information that had surfaced periodically over the years. And ultimately, this one-man grand jury was very important to moving this case forward, because after an 18-month investigation, this judge, this one-man grand jury, determined that there was in fact enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel with Martha Moxley's murder, leading to his arrest and trial. But before we get to his arrest and trial, I feel like maybe I should have done this earlier, but we're going to do it now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Michael Skakel and the Skakels in general. So Michael Skakel was born in 1960. He was the fifth child out of 7 siblings. His parents were Rushton Walter Skakel and Ann Reynolds. And the Skakel family was strongly tied to American politics. So Michael's aunt, Ethel, was the widow of U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, linking them to the Kennedy family. Michael's grandfather, George Skakel, founded the Great Lakes Carbon Corporation, a coal company. It was one of the largest and wealthiest privately held corporations in the whole entire country. The Skakels lived in Belle Haven, which is a very exclusive, or was, I don't know if it still is today, a very exclusive and affluent neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. And in 1973, Michael was just 12 years old. So I think I said 6 months earlier, but that's incorrect, obviously. When Michael was 12, his mother passed away from brain cancer. And that's when Michael began experimenting with and struggling with alcohol at a very young age. He also had a really hard time academically. He was a pretty bad student. He reportedly failed out of numerous different schools. Later in life, when he was about 26, he was actually diagnosed with dyslexia, which explained a lot of his previous difficulties. According to his cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Michael was a small, sensitive child who faced neglect and occasional abuse from his father, who was described as harsh and sometimes violent. Friends and neighbors of the Skakel family all said the same thing, that all the Skakel children were largely unsupervised. They had unlimited access to money and no boundaries, really. I do believe that happened after their mother died. Michael had some run-ins with the law in 1978. He was arrested for drunk driving in New York, but to sidestep those criminal charges, his father sent him to the Elan School in Poland, Maine, which was a place known for treating young people with behavioral or substance abuse issues. He had a very hard time there. He tried to escape twice before he ended up ultimately leaving after 2 years there. So after being at Elan, he enrolled at Curry College in Milton, Massachusetts. He did get his bachelor's degree in English. So even though he had challenges in the past, he was somewhat committed. And unfortunately, through the 1980s, he did struggle with substance abuse. He attended multiple rehab facilities and apparently eventually achieved sobriety in his 20s. He pursued a career as a professional athlete in speed skiing, and he competed internationally. He even tried out for the speed skiing demonstration team for the 1992 Winter Olympics in France. In 1991, he married Margot Sheridan, a professional golfer, and they had one child together. So that's as far as we're going to get in his personal life. But just to give you kind of an idea of him, and then I think that also paints a picture of how wealthy this family was. So where we left off before I dove into Michael and the Skakel family history was that one-man grand jury 18-month investigation decided that there was enough evidence to charge Michael Skakel, and he was arrested. So on January 9th, 2000, authorities issued an arrest warrant for an unnamed juvenile connected to the case, because at the time he was 15. But at this point, at the time of his arrest, he's 39 now. So he surrendered to police later that day, and he was shortly after released on $500,000 bail. So he was initially arraigned in juvenile court on March 14th because of his age at the time. But there was a lot of debate as to if this was an appropriate venue for his trial, because he's 39 years old now. So not quite a year, but January 31st, 2001, a judge ruled that Michael would be tried as an adult, which meant there was going to be a pretty high-profile courtroom battle. Also, shortly after Michael was arrested, his wife Margot filed for divorce, and their divorce was finalized in 2001, which made 2002 not a great year for Michael. His trial began in May of 2002 in Norwalk, Connecticut. He was represented by attorney Michael Sherman. He maintained his innocence. He said he was at his cousin's house at the time of the murder, which again, that already conflicts with that he was inside watching TV with his new live-in tutor. And then this confuses me a little bit, and I guess if this wasn't a mini crime story, or maybe I'll do it after the fact, I need to look into that apparently a pivotal moment in the trial came when prosecutors introduced excerpts from an audio-taped book proposal that Michael had made. An audio-taped book proposal. So I'm taking that as exactly like it sounds, I guess. What the hell am I trying to say here? He must have taped himself making a proposal for a book. But I'm guessing if they used it in his trial that it was a non-fiction book, I'm assuming. Where's my little Death by Southwest notebook? I need to look into that. Hold on. Book proposal. Okay, sorry guys. If I don't write it down right now, I will not remember it. So, pivotal moment in the case. Prosecutors introduced excerpts from an audio-taped book proposal that Michael had made. In the recording, he talks about that he was masturbating in a tree on the night of Martha's murder. He was peeping into neighbors' windows and masturbating in a tree near Martha's property between 11:30 and 12:30 that night. Possibly, I guess in the recording it said possibly the very tree beneath which her body was found. Although he didn't confess to the crime, hearing this admission, like this is not what his alibi was. And it's also kind of weird. And so the prosecution also took his words and overlaid the audio tape onto graphic images of the crime scene in a multimedia presentation that they gave during their closing arguments. So they played portions where Michael had said that he was fearful that he may have been jerking off the night of the murder and panicked. People who disagreed with this being allowed to be entered into the trial argued that the prosecution was kind of omitting, they were leaving out certain context from the tape. The prosecution really played only the parts that gave the impression that he was kind of confessing to the murder. Also, there were two former classmates of his from the Elan school, where he went, that place for troubled youths. They testified that they overheard Michael confessing to killing Martha with a golf club. And one of those students, Gregory Coleman, said that he remembered hearing Michael saying, quote, "I'm going to get away with murder. I'm a Kennedy," suggesting that like his family connections made him, kind of untouchable in this situation. But he was not untouchable because on June 7th, 2002, the jury found Michael Skakel guilty of murdering Martha Moxley. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison, and he was incarcerated at the Garner Correctional Institution in Newtown, Connecticut. And you would think that would be a nice little wrap this story up with a bow, but we're not going to do that. This conviction is not the end of this story. So Michael's defense team immediately was appealed the conviction. They said that the prosecution's use of the multimedia presentation, it was misleading, it was prejudicial. They argued that key portions of the tape were left out, exactly what I said before. So it kind of distorted what was, there's no context. So just immediately what I think of is reality TV, how, especially back in like early, what was it called? Laguna Hills and was it Laguna Hills? I don't know. All those shows, Real World and stuff, like, you can be edited to look like the villain or to look like the troublemaker in the house or whatever on the show. I mean, they can still do that today because the context is crucial. Like there has to be some context to his words. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree, but that seems like a viable argument. The prosecution defended their courtroom strategy, said that they Their use of exhibits was legitimate advocacy aimed at highlighting critical evidence and guiding the jury toward logical inferences. They maintained that they did not distort any evidence. They just emphasized the most compelling aspects. So, these appeals didn't totally go anywhere. In January 2003, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote a very controversial article in The Atlantic entitled "A Miscarriage of Justice." He insisted in this article that Michael's indictment was, quote, triggered by an inflamed media and that an innocent man is now in prison. Kennedy said there was more evidence suggesting that Kenneth Littleton, remember, the live-in tutor, had killed Martha. He also called Dominic Dunn the driving force behind Skakel's prosecution. He also released a book much later in 2016 that defended Skakel titled Framed. So in 2007, Michael Skakel had a new legal team. He had hired new attorneys, Hope Seeley and Hubert Santos, and they filed for a writ of habeas corpus and requested a new trial. Their argument introduced kind of a new idea to this entire case. This is really weird. This is so weird, guys. So this new theory involved Gaetano Tony Bryant. Gaetano, Tony is in quotes, so that's the name he went by. Gaetano Bryant, Tony, who's the cousin of NBA player Kobe Bryant and a former classmate of Michael's at the Brunswick School in Greenwich. So in a videotaped interview from 2003 with a private investigator, Vito Colucci, which Michael Skakel's defense team hired, Tony Bryant claimed that on the night of Martha Moxley's murders, two of his friends had expressed their intentions to rape her. Bryant stated that he didn't come forward earlier because his mother told him that as a black man, he would be unfairly implicated in the crime. So there was a 2-week hearing in April 2007 that allowed Michael's attorneys to present this new hearsay evidence among, several other points. In September 2007, they filed a petition requesting a new trial based largely on Tony Bryant's claims. Prosecutors were skeptical and said that Bryant may have very well fabricated the entire thing to promote a play that he was writing about the case. I mean, it's just crazy. So, Michael's defense team also had they had some new information about the Elon school where Michael had gone. They said aside from Gregory Coleman, the one who said that he heard Michael say, "I'm going to get away with murder because I'm a Kennedy," or whatever. They said that aside from him, no other people at the Elon school had ever heard Michael confessing to the murder, even to, all the interviews and stuff that they gave. No one else had said anything. So on October 25th, 2007, a Superior Court judge denied Michael's request for a new trial. The judge found that Tony Bryant's testimony was unreliable and there was no evidence of misconduct by the prosecution in the original trial. But Michael's defense team did not like this, so they appealed the decision to the Connecticut Supreme Court. And on March 26, 2009, a panel of 5 judges heard the appeal. In April 2010, they ruled against Michael in a 4-1 decision, which upheld the previous judgment. So they also were denying his request for a new trial. Michael then filed an appeal claiming that his original attorney, Michael Sherman, had provided ineffective counsel. And in an April 2013 hearing in Vernon, Connecticut, Michael testified that Sherman was more interested in basking in the media and kind of being, famous and on TV rather than putting together a solid defense for him. He accused Michael Sherman of only being focused on collecting fees and money because he had his own financial issues and he didn't care about representing Michael. Michael Sherman obviously responded to this and said he believed Michael Skakel was innocent. He said, "I was not negligent. I stand by the defense strategy that I employed," etc. However, in 2013, Michael's efforts finally paid off. A judge overturned his conviction. The ruling cited that he had received ineffective assistance from his trial counselor, particularly regarding the failure to present an alibi witness. So Michael is released on bail after serving 11 years. He was released on a $1.2 million bond. There were other conditions to this. He was to be monitored with a GPS device. He could have no contact with Martha Moxley's family. He must periodically check in over the phone, and he would not be allowed to leave the state of Connecticut unless granted permission. So he was free. He was essentially, not totally free. There were conditions to this, but essentially free. And as if this isn't enough back and forth, the state appealed this decision of the judge who overturned Michael's conviction. And in 2016, the Connecticut Supreme Court reinstated Michael's conviction. They said that his conviction was the result of overwhelming evidence presented by prosecutors and that his legal representation had, in fact, been adequate. And in 2018, prosecutors asked the Connecticut Supreme Court to revoke his bail and return him to prison to resume serving his sentence. The same court reversed itself, vacating the conviction once again and ordering a new trial. Like this, I had to read over all of these, like every 2 years, something new, a new appeal, a new this, a new this. My head was spinning. So I'm sure yours is. But basically, what year did he was sentenced to prison in 2002. So, and then he was let out of prison in 2013. These are the highlights. These are the most important parts. When, they appealed. In 2013, his conviction was overturned. He was released on a $1.2 million bond. In 2016, they wanted to reinstate the conviction. In 2018, they took it back. They're not going to reinstate the conviction, and they're going to give him a new trial. But in 2020, so at this point, he didn't go back to prison. He's still out on that, 1.2 bail, conviction overturned, reinstated, overturned again. And now in 2020, prosecutors declined to retry him. They announced they would not pursue a new trial against Michael Skakel, effectively bringing this decades-long legal saga to a close with no conclusion. Because as of now, Michael Skakel still remains a free man, and prosecutors have not retried the case, which has got to be excruciating for Martha's family. The legal twists and turns between 2002 and 2020 are just, I'm not a lawyer, as we all know, because remember, I didn't even know, I had to look up what an indictment actually meant. So clearly I am not an expert on legal matters, but it's crazy. It's crazy how long it took to do the appeals. I guess it's not. I guess that's pretty normal from what I understand at this point of doing all these cases. But either way, Martha was killed in 1975, so it has been many decades. And this case is still filled with unanswered questions, controversy, and very few answers. I think that it would be foolish to not recognize that the fact that the Skakel family is very wealthy and has powerful family connections. I'd imagine that did play a part in this. But it's at the end of the day, it's just got to be devastating for Martha's family. So thoughts are with them. And this is one, I was thinking that maybe in the future, some of these mini crime stories that I do, I probably need to make them more mini. And there's only like 10 days left of October, but I kind of like doing them. So I might keep it up. I thought maybe I could come back to these like later on, like once, if I'm not doing mini ones anymore, maybe I could come back to these and dig a bit deeper. Like if Michael Skakel is a free man and around, oh my God, it'd be super interesting to talk to him or to talk to anyone in Martha's family, you know? So unanswered. I know that that's very frustrating for people. For listeners, I know that a lot of listeners prefer a story that is wrapped up with a conclusion. Unfortunately, this one does not have that. And so this has got to be a hard like time of year for, sorry, a text message popped up on my phone. It distracted me for a minute. It's got to be a hard time of year for her family. So thoughts are with the Moxley family and hoping that I did this story justice. And thank you guys for listening. It is now 4:00 in the afternoon. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up so that I can get it published for you. And I will be back tomorrow with a new murder story in the Southwest. And tomorrow's story is actually a Halloween story as well that happens to take place in the Southwest. So I'm super excited about it. Okay, guys, that's it. I love you. Thank you for listening. Patreon. Thank you for, I did, again, not a plug, or maybe it is a plug. I don't know. But I did a few like story time, just rambling, talking about just life and things with very little filter, if any, on Patreon. And it's nice that you guys listen to it and respond. And I feel like get invested in these stories from my life. So I just, any Patreon people that are listening, I just want to say thank you. People on Instagram, I promise I'm getting to the messages, but if it's something that you think is of a timely matter, I'd say email me, or text. And that, the email and the text and all that information is in the show notes. So I was going to say it right now, but I don't have the show notes. Oh, here it is. The phone number is, of course, the phone number's not right in front of me. 520-302-5253. And you can leave a voicemail or text. And the email is deathx, the letter X, southwest@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And thank you guys for being there and for being on this podcasting journey with me. Okay, that is it. Goodbye, guys.
Death by Southwest is hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Executive produced by Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Jenna Schneider.
Audio editing and sound design by Margot Carmichael.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.